This little talk is particularly directed toward men, and I'd like to ask you two connected questions. The first question is, does marriage cure sexual temptation? And the second is, does getting married bring to an end all struggles with sinful sexual desires? Does marriage just bring that battle to an end? The reason I ask is, I think there can be the thinking in the mind of the single men, and for any single men watching this, there can be this notion that singleness is the wilderness and marriage is the promised land. It's this idea that singleness is so hard, it is just so tough trying to live a morally pure life when there's so much sexual temptation around. It's a long, hard slog, but I just can't wait to get married, because when I get married, the battle will be over. Those sexual desires can be fulfilled in a healthy context, in a healthy marriage, and I will no longer have these struggles with lust and sexual temptation. Marriage will be like a kind of utopia. Friends, this is not reality. We need to have balanced thinking about this. Yes, the Bible does say in 1 Corinthians 7 that it's better to marry than to burn with passion. And there is a sense in which marriage is God's provision. It's His provision for a number of areas of a man's life. But it is God's provision for a man to have a healthy, satisfying sexual relationship with his wife. That is true. But we need to be careful that we don't stretch that and talk ourselves into believing that marriage just brings to an end all struggles with illicit sexual desires. That is not the case. The married man still has to cope with his sinful nature and those natural urges and inclinations. And of course, sexual desire is itself a good thing, but because of the effect of sin, and we live in a fallen world, and the fact that sin has tainted us, love easily becomes lust, and we start to long for things that are not pleasing to God. So we mustn't think that, okay, once I get married, that just somehow comes to an end. No, married men still have struggles with sexual temptation. Now, one thing to consider here is look at some of the things that Paul said to Christians. Paul wrote to Christians at Thessalonica, "This is the will of God, your sanctification, that you abstain from sexual immorality." That was written to a church. And Paul wrote to the Corinthian Christians, "Flee from sexual immorality." Now we know from chapter 7 that some of the Corinthians were married, others were not married, and yet Paul tells all of them to flee from sexual immorality. Even the married Christians needed to be careful in this area. These instructions were given to men, women, marrieds, singles, young people. It's just church-wide. The encouragement I would give to single men is trust in the Lord. Put your trust in the Lord Jesus Christ to be the one to provide a godly wife for you, not just praying for a wife, but praying for a godly wife. And yes, to have that anticipation that part of marriage will be an enjoyable sexual relationship, but not to be thinking that it's going to bring to an end once and for all battles in this area. We are still going to need the Lord every single day of our lives, single, married, divorced, whatever our status, we need the Lord every day in order to walk this narrow road and be morally pure. May God help us to live morally pure lives in a world that has become a real minefield of sexual temptation. He can do it. He won't let us be tempted beyond what we can bear. As we call out to the Lord, He has promised to be faithful. He will help us.